The Toronto Raptors have made another signing, and this one actually has a shot at making the rosters. Jahmi'us Ramsey has been brought back to the team for this year's training camp, and he has a decent shot of getting that final roster spot. Yes, there will be competition. There are a few players in camp that he'll be fighting with, specifically favored at Bruno Fernando, who is on an unguaranteed contract right now. But Jahmi'us Ramsey is a player that showed quite a bit at the end of last season, and there were some clear holes to his games. But if they sort of filled, if they developed, and he's able to translate what he was doing in the G League last season to the actual NBA during preseason, during training camp, there's a legitimate shot that he's going to make the full roster for this team this season. Not something for the future, not something for our prospect pool, prospect system. So we're diving into all of that in this video. But again, if you haven't hit the subscribe button just yet, folks, the season is just around the corner, and we're covering everything regarding this Toronto Raptors team. So if you don't want to miss a single thing, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. It means the world to me. Keeps you up to date with everything regarding this Toronto Raptors squad. But let's dive into the news. Let's dive into what's happening with this team, because the Toronto Raptors have signed Jahmi'us Ramsey, according to Blake Murphy. It's been reported, and this essentially has put the final cap on terms of what the roster is going to be looking like. So Ramsey's deal is an Exhibit 10 contract per source. So there's 14 guaranteed contracts on this Raptors team. There are 3 two-way contracts, and Bruno Fernando on a non-guaranteed minimum deal. There's plus 3 Exhibit 10 contracts with Jahmi'us Ramsey, with Rodin, as well as Battle, and who all could be 905 bound or push for the 15th man, the two-way roster spots, and then Gradey Dick as well as Chandler are also 905 bound. So the Toronto Raptors have essentially filled out their roster. They've confirmed what this team is going to be looking like, heading into this year's training camp. And Jahmi'us Ramsey is a player that did impress me a ton last season. No, it wasn't just that dunk he had, during that game against the Pistons that people jokes that earned him that extra 10-day contract. It wasn't just that dunk for Jahmi'us Ramsey. He actually had some pretty solid stats for the team when he had some stretches. So again, nothing overwhelming in terms of the actual production. He's a 6'3" kind of wing that's very strong, that plays solid defense on ball, brings energy, brings the effort night in, night out. Averaged 3 points per game last season, 1.2 rebounds. And the ugly part of this, and the clear hole in this game, was the 27% shooting from behind the 3-point line. Because again, he brought the effort, he brought the energy out there on the offense and defensive end. Seemed like a decent slasher. It seemed like he could actually dribble the ball a little bit as well out there for a shooting guard, but you need to be able to knock down the three, and that's something that is essential to someone's game. But he did show a couple things, and the numbers did show some promise in certain areas for Jahmi'us Ramsey in regards to shooting the basketball. Because again, we can see that he took 3.1 attempts per game from behind the 3-point line, which is much more elevated than it was in his previous seasons with the Sacramento Kings. He's still only 22 years old last year, so a guy that has that room to grow potential, and the percentages on a higher volume didn't decrease from where it was, earlier on in his career. Again, there was also 1 steal a night, brought the effort, brought the energy on that end of the floor, and was playing kind of in an ugly system. But if we dive into the more deep dives in terms of the stats in regards to what he was doing, Jahmi'us Ramsey took 56% of his shots last season. They were all behind the 3-point line. So he took over half of his shots from behind the 3-point line. He's showing that he's been able to take a step out. And even though the percentages didn't completely match in terms of the level of production that was there, he was shooting 33% behind the 3-point line on, again, a decent sample size, a decent volume. So again, the numbers, you can tell he's confident. You can tell the same way Pascal Siakam was in the second season. The jump shot wasn't really there yet, but there was a level of confidence in shooting that basketball. And frankly, he should be, even though the numbers aren't that exquisite out there at the NBA level. The dude was an absolute monster out there from behind the 3-point line, out there in the G League in 23 games, for a chunk of last season, for the Oklahoma G League team. Essentially, he came out and shot 42% from behind the 3-point line on 4 attempts per game. And everyone's like, oh, it's a G League, you can't really translate over. Well, jump shooting at that level is something that is tough to fake. It's not something that, again, is something that's a complete write-off, something you should ignore, something you should just look at. Again, the 22 points per game that he's putting up a night, that's something we probably shouldn't expect out there at the NBA level. But the fact that he was shooting over 40% from behind the 3-point line is something that's encouraging. The fact that he is an athlete, he showed some defense and potential, some promise dribbling the basketball, definitely is an on-ball defender as well. If that jump shot can really come together, if he proves during training camp, during preseason, that he is a guy that developed, that improved that jump shot coming into this year, then Masai Ujiri is going to have some tough decisions in regards to who's going to make that final roster spot. Because, again, there's a few guys that are really in contention right now, and Masai Ujiri is really looking at in terms of decisions about this final roster spot. Again, Bruno Fernando is that guy. He was a fan favorite for the Atlanta Hawks. The Hawks wanted to keep him, but after a few trades they made, they didn't have the roster space to really keep him on the team. So Bruno Fernando, he's a big man. He's a bit more of a positional need. Doesn't space the floor that well, but definitely brings the energy, the rebounding, the defense out there at that forward spot. So it still remains that Bruno Fernando is the favorite to make that final roster spot for this team, but Jahmi'us Ramsey's also in there. We obviously discussed this entire video talking about Ramsey, but Roden is a guy that I think also shouldn't be written out in terms of a scoring wing that can put up shots, can put up buckets, out there at that 2-guard spot. He's an interesting piece and probably the guy that a lot of Raptors fans, after watching Summer League, are most favorited in terms of wanting to see, get an opportunity, get a chance. Again, we'll have to see preseason. We'll have to see it all shakes out. But Jamison Battle was that guy that had that absolutely silky, just smooth-looking three-point stroke over the course of this year's Summer League. And he's coming in on an Exhibit 10 contract. And when you have a team built around Scottie Barnes, RJ Barrett, Jakob Poeltl still in that starting lineup, when we have that team, even Bruce Brown's not the most elite three-point shooter here now at this point. We're not sure we're going to run at the 4, whether it's Gradey Dick, Bruce Brown, those positional fits. If you have a guy that's just a three-point sniper, he can come in and make 50% of his shots, or, that might be a high expectation, but Battle was taking those types of shots out there in this year's Summer League. He has some height. He had a quick release. It wasn't a Matt Thomas-esque where it looks like at the NBA he won't be able to get that jump shot off. Jamison Battle's also a guy that we should not write off as a roster fit, a guy that could make that roster spot, to close out this season here. So really it's going to come down to how well Jahmi'us Ramsey's jump shot has developed if the Toronto Raptors want to go the route of bringing in another wing player, another guy that can come out and beef out their sort of wing line. And then you have to trust that Scottie Barnes, all these guys can play a little bit bigger than they are. But positionally, if I were, a betting man, if I were to sort of predict in terms of what's going to happen, it's probably going to end up being Bruno Fernando. And then we have these guys like Jahmi'us Ramsey in the G League. And then if the year gets messy like it did last season, we'll probably see Jahmi'us Ramsey. We'll probably see Jamison Battle. We'll probably see a lot of the guys that have been signed over the course of the season get a chunk of opportunities, get a chunk of time to play out there at the second half of this year. The back half of this year, that's probably when we'll see them if the Toronto Raptors do end up going down that tanking route once again, which I'm hopeful isn't the case. I'm hopeful, even though it would be nice to get a Cooper flag out there for the future of this franchise, I'm hopeful that this team, built around Scottie Barnes right now, built around RJ, built around Immanuel Quickley, is able to shock and surprise a lot of people and look like a squad that's on the upswing, that's on that trajectory to move upwards in the NBA sort of situation rather than, out there in the mud. So probably they're going to go with Bruno Fernando to start off the season, but there is a legitimate shot, especially if that three-point shot, because again, he's being played out of position a ton, and especially if Ochai Agbaji's disappointing a little bit, Jahmi'us Ramsey gets a legitimate shot at making that final roster spot. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. You guys best think as far. Subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. I'm signing out. Cheers.